Chapter 6. F-177 District 6. Doomsday Spiritual Artifact Master. Concentric circles. Something is about to come out. Concentric circles. The entire martial arts hall fell into a stifling silence, an unexplainable tension hanging in the air. Song K went from room to room, pushing open doors to check. In the kitchen, shattered dishes and fragments littered the floor, but no one was there. The trainees' dormitory doors and windows were wide open, dried black bloodstains streaked down the walls, yet no one was present. The training grounds were empty, various equipment strewn haphazardly about, remnants of combat scattered everywhere, but still no one to be found. The further she walked, the more solemn her expression became. Her heart felt like it was submerged in ice water, gradually sinking into the depths of the sea. Finally, she reached the deep rear courtyard, hearing faint sounds coming from within the meditation room. Could it be here? The door wasn't locked. Song K grasped the handle and slowly pushed it open. Taking a quick glance around, the room seemed to have been ransacked. Most of the furniture was overturned, cabinets lay toppled, a short table was in pieces, even the ashes from the incense burner were scattered on the ground. She shifted her gaze to continue looking inside when, in the next second, her pupils contracted. Zhang Yang, her master, knelt in the depths of the meditation room, a hole the size of a bowl in his chest. Fresh red blood had dried and congealed, forming a large dark circle. Leaning on his sword, his head hung low, his body motionless. There was no trace of the lively appearance with raised eyebrows and reproachful words he would direct at her. He stood in silence, like a shattered statue. Song K stumbled forward, her hands unconsciously trying to block the hole in his chest. Master. Throughout U Mountain, even throughout the entire alliance, who could kill Master? How could Master possibly die? Zhang Ting's body had already stiffened, and as she touched him, he tilted slightly. His bent finger joints loosened their grip on the sword, and it fell heavily to the ground. Song K reached out in a flurry to support him, but she couldn't. Unexpectedly, she discovered another door behind him that he was blocking. It was the storeroom behind the meditation room. Because it was too far from the training grounds, this storeroom had long been abandoned and was only used to store equipment or miscellaneous items. Song K looked down at it dazedly, and after a moment, it suddenly dawned on her. Master's posture before his death clearly indicated he was guarding something. Perhaps stirred by the sound, the noise behind the door grew louder. The continuous banging quickly disrupted her thoughts. Bang, bang, bang. The entire bamboo door shook violently under the weight, its frame on the brink of collapsing, and the low, frenzied roar repeatedly echoed. Something was about to come out. Song K held her breath, poised for action. Bang! A deafening crash, and the bamboo door collapsed with a resounding thud. A large group of putrid-smelling monsters rushed out. Upon a rough count, there were surprisingly dozens of them, completely filling the meditation room. Seeing the monsters charging towards her at the forefront, Song K stepped on the wall and leapt upwards, executing a mid-air kick that viciously sent them flying back, the powerful force toppling those behind them. Landing nimbly, she was about to follow up with another kick and then flee through the door when her movements abruptly halted. The monsters fell to the ground, their grotesque faces fully exposed. Lin, senior sister Lin, Song K cried out in astonishment. This momentary pause gave the monsters a chance to recover, the fallen ones rising, and those lagging behind catching up. The inside of the storeroom was dim, but still enough for her to discern the monster's features. Song K panically lifted her gaze, recognizing the familiar brows and eyes among the grayish-blue faces. Junior brother Xiao, Aunt Pang, even if their eyes were clouded and ashen, describing their horrifying state, she recognized them at first glance, facing the people she had spent so much time with. These monsters were none other than the martial arts hall's trainees. There were senior brothers who had lost to her in sparring multiple times, gentle senior sisters who cared for her daily life. Each and every person who had once been alive had now turned into mindless monsters, their hair disheveled and filthy as they attacked her. The pitch-black sharp claws lunged at her. Song Kei couldn't evade in time, and a chunk of her lower hem was cut away. She fled in disarray, unable to effectively counterattack. No wonder she had searched the entire martial arts hall, and no one was outside. No wonder Master stubbornly guarded the entrance. He couldn't bring himself to kill his own students, so he chose to lock them away. If Master couldn't bring himself to do it, neither could she. Her eyes grew increasingly moist, and as Song Kei rolled and dodged with no strength left, she repeated their names over and over, trying to bring back their senses. In District 177, she was a recluse, quiet and reserved, often leaving early and returning late. Except for old Cheng, no one was willing to interact with her. But that was okay. She had Yu Mountain Martial Arts School, where most people wouldn't mock her. They would even celebrate her birthday with her every year. However, now those senior brothers and sisters who had once sung "Happy Birthday" to her had become unrecognizable. The horde of monsters surged forward densely. Song Kei retreated again and again, but there was no more room to retreat. Her slender back slammed harshly into the door panel. Escape? She could escape, but then what? There were so many monsters, the meditation room's door couldn't possibly hold them all. Should she release them like this? If Master were still alive, he would surely scold her thoroughly. In that distracted moment, a swift dark shadow stepped on the head of a monster behind it and leapt high towards her. Compared to the others, its size had swelled several times over. Its desire to attack was particularly strong, saliva dripping from between its jagged, sharp teeth. Its bloody claw clamped down on her shoulder, its mouth poised to bite into her neck. The stench of decay was close, and the guillotine of death was about to fall. Song Kei pressed hard against its dark face, locking eyes with its grayish-white, murky gaze, tears streaming down her face. She cried out its name. Song N, that person who used to laugh heartily, who even when sick would seek to make her happy, that person who had promised to buy her 4 tea eggs, now only wished to viciously sever her veins. Song N emitted a throaty, ho-ho, sounds from deep within its trachea, its cruel and bloodthirsty actions showing no pause. Its nails pierced her clavicle, and fresh blood gushed out. Song Kei's pain triggered convulsions, and with tear-filled eyes, she twisted and broke its arm with a crack. It hesitated for a moment, its arm limp. Song Kei took advantage of the opening to break free, rolling frantically in the opposite direction. The one with the broken arm, Song N, paused for only an instant before fiercely attacking her again. It was already devoid of consciousness, feeling no pain whatsoever. Song Kei was trapped in an endless fight, her wounds multiplying. Limbs, body, heart, the fragments scattered, blood and gore splattered. No matter where she attacked, no matter how she tried to resist, she couldn't stop the relentless tearing and biting of the monsters. Tears transformed from scalding to icy, and finally to dried-up bitterness. Song Kei mournfully realized that she was faced with an eternal cycle of either being devoured by this horde of monsters or killing them all, and then, surviving. Her physical strength was rapidly depleting. Unable to dodge once, she suffered another wound on her lower back. The deep red blood soaked through the floor. Song Kei threw a punch, counter-attacking, and the nearest monster was thrown several meters away, causing her to tumble heavily to the ground. Coincidentally, she fell right next to Zhang Ting. Song Kei widened her eyes and instinctively looked at her master. Zhang Ting's eyes, which hadn't had a chance to close yet, stared at her coldly, devoid of sadness or happiness. It seemed like he was waiting for her to make a decision. "I'm sorry." Song Kei turned her head away from his gaze and murmured weakly. This apology, she didn't know if it was directed towards the deceased master or the unrecognizable senior brothers and sisters. "I'm sorry," but she wanted to survive. A powerful gust of wind brushed against her ears. At the critical moment, Song Ke pulled out the long sword from beside her master. A deep blue light suddenly emanated from her palm. In the blink of an eye, the long sword transformed into a sharp tang knife. This type of wide-bladed cleaver had a unique advantage in close combat. Song Ke flipped and jumped up, gathering her core strength without hesitation and swinging the sword forcefully. The monster's movement abruptly stopped, and it was almost split in half from top to bottom. Thick, viscous blood sprayed from its shattered throat. It struggled a few times in inertia, then fell to the ground lifeless. Song Ke's heart skipped a beat. She suddenly realized that chopping off the head seemed to be effective. However, the death of their kind didn't deter the remaining monsters. They continued to charge forward without hesitation. After identifying their fatal weaknesses, Song Ke no longer hesitated or hoped for luck. Her counterattacks were sharp and precise, each strike targeting their vital points. Expressionless, she was like an asura emerging from hell. Half an hour later, dozens of monsters lay fallen on the ground, utterly lifeless. Except for Song En. Without a doubt, it was the most ferocious among them. Even with an arm and a leg severed, it still exerted an intense pressure on Song Ke. The stump of its severed arm exposed necrotic and decaying tissue, constantly dripping black, murky fluid. Song En, fixated on her, its body twisted at an eerie angle as it crawled menacingly towards her. Her eye sockets were dry and gritty, having long lost the ability to shed tears. The hand that held the knife hung by her side, trembling slightly. After 14 years of martial practice, this was the first time her hands uncontrollably shook. Everything should end now. She slowly raised the tang knife, its deep blue glow reflecting on her face, her beautiful countenance icy and cold. Closing her eyes, the tip of the blade gleamed with blue light and surged forward like a mighty force. Chop! Slash! A few drops of dark viscous fluid splattered onto her eyelids, tracing the shape of tears as they ran down her cheeks. In the dimly lit room, Song Ke carefully arranged the bodies of the monsters one by one, placing their heads back in their rightful places, preserving their dignity in death as humans. Then she sat amidst the blood pool, quietly gazing at these once roaring faces, striving to remember their former appearances. Suddenly, her gaze froze. Inside the head of one of the monsters, something seemed to reflect light and flashed for a moment. She had swung the blade too forcefully, and the monster's head had shattered like a watermelon. Bending down, Song Ke picked up a crystal from inside. A small crystal, about the size of a lychee, with an octahedral shape. It looked both cloudy and transparent, quite peculiar. She hastily pried open another head but found nothing similar inside. Not every one of them had it. She observed each one closely and ultimately found 3 of these crystals. The other 2 appeared similar, but the third one was slightly larger and exhibited a more transparent white color inside. It had been found in Song En's head. What were these things? Song Ke stared at this thing that definitely wouldn't grow inside a human's head, something beyond her scope of understanding, giving rise to more and more confusion. As she pondered, a faint noise suddenly came from outside the window. More of them? Song Ke tensed her entire body, gripping the sword handle and swinging it outward. A killing intent surged out, and the window of the meditation room instantly shattered into pieces. Amidst the rising dust, a half-human-sized bird-like creature stood on the windowsill, staring at her motionlessly. Its appearance resembled a chicken, but it had a pair of massive wings on its back. A tuft of white feathers adorned its forehead, and its front and back talons emitted a metallic glint. Its whip-like tail feathers remained still. The giant bird remained in place for an unknown amount of time, observing her in silence. Its icy vertical pupils were locked onto her. As if an observer of Song Ke's execution, it watched her in despair and helplessness, watched her exhaustively gasping for breath, and then watched her unleash a killing spree. Song Ke's scalp tingled, her heart pounded, and with the demeanor of confronting a formidable foe, she held her blade forward. The standoff between her and the bird was intense. The bird-like creature's tiger-like front talons moved slightly. It lowered its head to size her up for a couple of seconds, and then disinterestedly turned its head away. It elegantly spread its wings and flew off without a sound. Zhang Yang clenched the pale white crystal in her palm, gazing blankly in the direction the bird had departed. A recurring thought circled in her mind. This world had truly gone crazy. Chapter 7. F-177 District 7. Doomsday Spiritual Artifact Master. Concentric Circles Island Escape Plan. Concentric Circles. Zhang Yang buried the people from the U Mountain Martial Arts School in the back hills. She was clumsy and stubborn, only knowing how to dig with her head down. Sweat and blood mixed together as they splattered into the yellow earth with the rise and fall of the iron shovel. Her lips were tightly pressed, her movements repetitive and mechanical, as if she were an untiring humanoid machine. After digging the holes, she began to carve gravestones, until blisters formed on all 10 of her fingers, and she barely managed to carve the tombstones for each person. A total of 23 small mounds of earth, each holding her senior brothers, senior sisters, her master, and all her attachments here. While counting the number of people, Zhang Yang unexpectedly made a discovery. Not all of the Academy's members had fallen here. U Mountain was situated in E-166 district, not very convenient for transportation. The school provided food and lodging for its students. People like Zhang Yang, who were wholeheartedly devoted to training, had everything they needed on the mountain: food, clothing, shelter, and wouldn't descend the mountain unless necessary. But there were also individuals like Tun Chin and Li Ta, who were self-assured, only coming to the mountain for scheduled training sessions and rarely staying at the academy. She didn't find traces of these two among the monster corpses, so they must have luckily missed this event. Besides them, there was Zhang Si, a senior brother who participated in the Azure Phoenix assessment, and his group. He took away the elites of the academy. Who knew where they were now? With the chaos outside, would they even return? Zhang Yang picked up a water hose and sprayed the ground, carefully cleaning the bloodstains from the walls and floor. After finishing the cleaning, she inspected the entire martial hall once again. The TV showed nothing but static, no signal, but the water and electricity were functioning normally. She found a light screen in a student's dormitory. She wasn't sure whose it was, and it wasn't locked with a password. Many pages were open in the background. As Zhang Yang browsed, she realized that the online discussions were already in turmoil. People were discussing topics related to Doomsday and zombies. Some criticized the lack of action from the Alliance, others were suggesting hoarding for self-protection, and some were despairingly sending out distress messages. She wasn't proficient with electronic devices and only had a rough understanding. Apparently, the outside world had also been infested with these dreadful creatures, but the situation was far better than in District 177. At least most cities hadn't fallen into chaos yet. Zhang Yang thought for a moment and attempted to search for the Alliance's official news account. The latest pinned message was posted 2 days ago, stating that the Alliance had opened hundreds of emergency shelters. Residents could navigate to them using their own guidance systems for nearby safety. She scrolled down and clicked on the details link, but a message abruptly appeared on the screen: no access permission. Power and status not only determined wealth distribution but also controlled information access. The owner of this light screen, just like her, wasn't allowed even the small privilege of viewing emergency shelters. Zhang Yang set down the light screen and finally noticed she was covered in grime. During the earlier fights, blood had splattered everywhere, staining her. Later, she had spent a considerable time digging in the dirt. She went to the bathroom and took a cold shower to clean herself thoroughly. Afterward, she used a bandage to dress her wounds, cleaning the wound, stopping the bleeding, applying medicine, and bandaging it. The blood of those monsters, it should be blood, was black in color and flowed slower than a normal person's. Recalling the expression of panic on the middle-aged man's face at the pier when he was injured, Zhang Yang looked down at her wound, uncertain of what consequences might arise. Night fell, and the sky unknowingly darkened. Song K organized an 80-liter hiking backpack and packed it with warm, moisture-resistant clothing, a small amount of easily preservable food, a wide-mouthed water bottle and purification tablets, a flint flashlight, a portable first aid kit, a sleeping bag, and a tent. After some consideration, she also added a compass. As for weapons, her supernatural ability was her most potent arsenal, so she decided not to bring anything else. Before leaving, Song K hesitated for a long time while holding a pen. Originally, she had thought about writing something, but what could she write? Who would she write it for? To describe witnessing her master's tragic death? To recount how she had been forced by circumstances to take lives, ending the lives of the 22 individuals from the martial school. After today, Yu Mountain Martial Arts School would cease to exist. Who would forgive her? No one would forgive her. In the end, she wrote nothing. Song K locked the gate of the martial school and took one last deep look before turning and leaving. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the Fool's Wharf was brightly lit, and the passage to the harbor was jammed with people. There were no walls impervious to wind, and evidently, news of the military's passage through the harbor had leaked out tonight. Several green military trucks were parked at the end of the road, acting as temporary roadblocks. Standing beside the trucks were several tall individuals dressed in military uniforms. They wore camouflage pants tucked into combat boots and had a resolute expression, emanating a sharp and determined aura. Officially, the Alliance hadn't issued a rescue mission in District 177. Technically, this team was just passing through and wasn't obligated to organize the evacuation of civilians. However, they still chose to bring along local residents as much as possible. Of course, this bringing along came with conditions. Each resident had to pass their thorough inspection before being allowed to board the starship behind them. Alone, Song K trailed behind the group with their numerous bags and luggage, craning her neck to look ahead. There were 2 lines in total, moving faster than she had anticipated. Everyone carried backpacks and dragged suitcases, moving forward silently and obediently. Along the way, someone would check the color of their pupils and whether they had any wounds or sores on their bodies and limbs. At the forefront of the line was a folding table with a black box about the size of a radio on it. Every person who had passed the previous inspection had to stand in front of the table with arms outstretched, like undergoing a CT scan. The black box emitted scans, and a screen extended from its side. From where Song K stood, she could only see a chaotic tangle of red and green lines on the screen. During the brief time she observed, 3 individuals at the front of the line were cleared, but the lines on the screen remained unchanged. One of them, a stern-looking man in his 30s who appeared to be the leader, moved his lips slightly. All 3 were directed towards the back half of the starship. Song K stared intently at the seemingly unremarkable black box. While she pondered, she felt a forceful push on her back. Move aside, don't block the way. The person was ruthless in his actions, using his full strength. Unfortunately, even with the strong push, the seemingly fragile young girl's stance was as stable as a pine tree. She remained motionless, while he stumbled forward a few steps due to his own excessive force. He froze on the spot for a moment, then quickly regained his composure, glaring menacingly at Song K. Not wanting to draw attention to herself, Song K lowered her gaze, stepped back, and courteously made space for him. She recognized this man. His name was Xu Weiguo, and his fair-skinned son beside him was Xu Xing. Xu Weiguo had made a fortune by engaging in some shady smuggling business, and it was rumored that he was quite influential in the outside world, even having connections in B-grade cities. He was the wealthiest individual in District 177. He always wore an oddly shaped gold watch on his wrist, and a blindingly shiny gold belt held up his round belly. While walking, his nostrils seemed perpetually aimed toward the sky. He might have been small-minded. If someone crossed him, he would hold a grudge for a long time. Song Ke had heard from old Cheng about his domineering behavior and didn't want to stir up trouble at this critical moment, so she quickly made way for him without saying a word. Consider yourself smart. Shu Weiguo was accustomed to being arrogant. Seeing her timid and apprehensive expression, he muttered a few words, but nothing substantial. He pushed through the queue of people, openly swearing and cutting in line. Holding his son's hand, he made his way to the very front. People dared not speak up, so they could only avoid him, suppressing their anger and swallowing their pride. His son was somewhat thinner-skinned, lowering his head in embarrassment and letting Shu Weiguo pull him forward. The two of them quickly passed the inspections along the way and stood before the black box. First, it was Shu Weiguo's turn. Similar to the previous residents who had been checked, the black box showed no response. However, when Shu Xing stepped onto it, the dormant black box suddenly came to life. The chaotic red lines on the screen remained at the bottom, but several green lines undulated like rolling hills, oscillating in continuous arcs as if an electrocardiogram had regained vital signs after a long sleep. The man next to the black box slightly straightened his body, glanced at Shu Xing, and said, "Go to the front cabin." The commandeered starship was a standard civilian model, with two distinct cabin classes, economy and luxury. The economy class had a larger overall area, but the seats were cramped. The luxury class had small compartments for each seat, tea-colored glass with privacy film, and a greater focus on protecting passenger privacy. The two cabin classes were not connected, even having separate entrances. Upon hearing this result, before anyone could react, Shu Weiguo's face was filled with joy. Holding his son's hand, he was about to move forward. The man held his hand up, his stern expression conveying seriousness. "You go to the back." Shu Weiguo's eyes widened, his tone grew frantic. "This is my son. We are together," the man repeated, expressionless. "You, go to the back." Shu Weiguo was so frustrated that his mouth seemed about to twist, but after surreptitiously glancing at the man's sturdy arms, his forceful demeanor wavered a bit. "Sir, can we discuss this and find a compromise? Can't we?" He reached into his bag, pulled out a thick bundle of newspapers concealing money, and discreetly tried to slip it into the man's pocket. The man pushed his hand back, his tone icy. "Ability users and ordinary people need to be evacuated separately. That's the regulation." Ability users. Song Ke, now somewhere in the middle of the queue, perked up her ears, catching this unfamiliar term keenly. Shu Weiguo's soft approach didn't work. His face instantly elongated, and even his tone grew more assertive. "Who is your superior? Have him come and talk to me. Do you even know who I am? Do you understand the rules? I must be on this luxury cabin today." His small son was blocked by him. Shu Weiguo equally prohibited him from boarding the ship. Seeing this, the young soldier beside them simultaneously pulled out his gun, all of them aiming at Shu Weiguo. "Captain, should we?" Shu Weiguo trembled, but thinking about the starship tickets that had been unexpectedly cancelled despite being bought, and considering the complete collapse of transportation routes in District 177, a fierce determination flashed in his eyes. He gritted his teeth and refused to give in. The stern captain glanced at Shu Xing, who had his head down, and signaled the soldiers to lower their guns. However, he didn't order them to let Shu Weiguo through, leaving him stranded. As Shu Weiguo remained immobile, the others in the queue shifted to the other side on their own. Luckily, there weren't many people left, so the inspection process didn't take much time. The line was getting shorter, and in just a few more people, it would be Song Ke's turn. However, a new situation arose unexpectedly. "Ma'am, please remove your hat for inspection." A woman, tightly wrapped from head to toe, squeezed through from behind. She ran forward without any concern, holding a little boy with a duck-billed cap in her arms. The boy's face was turned downwards, pressed against her neck, unmoving. The woman displayed astonishing strength, breaking through the line in just a few strides. She even knocked over a folding table, causing the black box on it to wobble and triggering a piercing alarm. The box tumbled to the ground, severing its connection to the display screen. However, Song K had already noticed. In that brief moment, the red line on the black box rebounded like it had hit bottom, shooting up to its peak. "Please undergo inspection." The heavily armed soldiers surrounding her quickly reacted, encircling the woman. Blocked in her path, she trembled and knelt on the ground, repeatedly kowtowing, "I beg you, please, save my precious child, please, take him away." Though her plea was evident, half of her body bizarrely twitched uncontrollably. Someone cautiously stepped forward, lifting the scarf she used to cover her head. They then exclaimed in shock, "Captain, she's already mutated." The woman's profile gradually became visible, and Song K was taken aback. It was Aunt Ching. However, at this moment, Aunt Ching's face was ashen, with blue veins appearing to writhe menacingly beneath her skin. Drool incessantly trickled from the corners of her mouth. Despite her convulsions being so intense, the little boy nestled on her shoulder remained silent and motionless. Another soldier stepped forward, removing the boy's baseball cap and examining his eyes. He then turned to the captain, shaking his head slowly. "The child is the same." Aunt Ching suddenly lifted her head, her eyes bulging. Her murky gray pupils froze, and her facial muscles seemed difficult to control, causing her expression to distort. "Lockdown!" the captain shouted loudly. The soldiers raised their guns, while the remaining civilians in the queue scattered in panic like birds and beasts. Amidst the chaos, Aunt Ching collided with Xu Weiguo and his son, Xu Xing. Right at that moment, Xu Xing, who had been lowering his head, happened to raise it and caught sight of her appearance. His face turned white as a sheet, his pupils quivering intensely, and he let out a piercing scream, piercing through eardrums. "Aw!" Invisible waves of energy surged through the air, centered around Xu Xing. The temperature plummeted around him, and a dozen ice spikes shot up from the ground, aimed directly at Aunt Ching and the little boy. Due to poor control, many of them scattered in all directions. Not good. The child's supernatural ability is out of control. Damn, it's an ice type. This just got tricky. In the icy and snowy surroundings, only the captain remained composed. He swiftly gestured, and a few well-trained individuals followed suit, the same tall figures that had been standing by the pickup truck earlier. A lean man stepped forward from the crowd, advancing toward Xu Xing instead of retreating. Wherever he passed, countless ice spikes seemed to strike an invisible barrier and shattered into pieces. "Everyone, get inside." The soldier with a simple and honest face pounded his fists on the ground, and hollowed out circles of earth akin to old Mongolian yurts emerged out of thin air. Startled residents followed his lead, taking refuge within the earthen circles. Xu Weiguo's legs had already turned limp, and he was dragged in like a lifeless fish. Song K jogged behind the crowd, but her gaze remained fixed on Xu Xing's direction. These tall figures in military attire turned out to be ability users with exceptional skills. Suddenly, the corner of her eye caught a certain figure. The stern man moved like lightning, appearing and disappearing within his team's cover. Amidst the ice spikes, he maneuvered with ease, steadily closing in on Xu Xing. His ghostly movements and speed far surpassed ordinary individuals, so swift that one couldn't see his actions clearly. Amidst the ice, wind, and flickering lightning, he exerted immense pressure on everyone. Xu Xing fell into a state of panic, his pupils occasionally catching glimpses of the man's agile figure. However, he couldn't track his movements with the naked eye. In a fluster, he shook his head left and right, causing the ice spikes around him to waver, ready to collapse and randomly attack in all directions. The next second, the man appeared behind him, his hand swung down. Xu Xing's terrified scream was caught in his throat as he blacked out. The ice spikes vanished, and the team members immediately surrounded Xu Xing, securing him with special ropes in preparation to transfer him onto the starship. The Mongolian yurts crumbled, soldiers calmed the remaining residents, and they hurriedly conducted inspections and began to retreat. Shu Weiguo had already turned into a puddle of soft mud, no longer daring to be arrogant. He cowered as he was led to an ordinary cabin, not even daring to glance at his son. Song Kei's heart raced erratically. When the ice shards filled the air earlier, Aunt Qing had been pushed back by an invisible barrier, causing Xiao Bao to slip from her shoulder and fall nearby. Just as several sharp ice shards were about to descend, seemingly about to pierce the child on the spot, Song Kei grabbed a broken piece of wood from the ground, and a burst of blue light erupted from her palm, forming a shield to block the attack. Song Kei didn't know what mutation meant, but Aunt Qing was visibly different from the monsters encountered before. If she recalled correctly, Aunt Qing had been bitten at the dock. Despite the passing days, she still retained her clear consciousness and could speak normally. Amid her muddled thoughts, Song Kei felt that something was off. Given the urgent situation, she acted on instinct to save Xiao Bao. After the ice shards were blocked, Aunt Qing rushed over and picked up the child. Without saying a word, her gray-white eyes glanced at Song Kei, and she turned and ran. With everyone's attention focused on the icy battle, no one noticed the subtle movements here. Aunt Qing probably knew there was no hope of boarding the starship and chose not to linger, sprinting away without looking back. Song Kei gazed at her fading figure until a distant urgency echoed, "Young lady, come for inspection." She responded with an acknowledgement, about to move forward. However, her foot accidentally kicked something, causing a small object to roll out quite a distance. It was the black box, battered from the melee, but its indicator light stubbornly stayed lit. Was it not damaged? Song Kei picked it up with both hands, gazing at it curiously. Suddenly, the black box seemed to have suffered some sort of stimulus. The red and green lines on the screen started dancing chaotically like disco lights. In a short time, they froze like a system crash, all lines turning rigidly straight, and then, bang! Smoke erupted, and it exploded right then and there. Song Kei, wait, how did this thing manage to self-destruct? Could she still throw it away now? Chapter 8. F-177 District 8. Doomsday Spiritual Artifact Master Concentric Circles. Goodbye my home. Novice Village completed. Concentric circles. Song Kei stood in front of a folding table, exchanging glances with the tall figure in military attire. On the table sat that burnt and short-circuited black box. She subtly pushed it forward to convey her innocence. The tall figure glanced at the charred mess of wires and circuits, then back at her. Suddenly, he exclaimed, "Oh, wow." Song Kei's nerves were on edge. She quickly waved her hands and shook her head, saying, No, it's not me." Yeah, not you." The tall figure beamed at her with a brilliant smile, then turned to report, "Captain. The detectors busted." The stern captain approached, bending down to inspect. The ventilation panel of the black box was still emitting smoke. He pressed a button, the indicator light blinked twice, and then went out. He looked hopelessly at it, and then raised his gaze to Song Kei, narrowing his eyes as he noticed her hands. "It really wasn't me, it malfunctioned all on its own." Song Kei continued to explain. She hadn't done anything, and if these two asked her for money, what would she do? "Show me your hand." The captain's voice was cold. Song Kei obediently extended her open palm. Her hands were wrapped in white bandages, starting from her knuckles, winding around her wrists, forearms, and elbows, disappearing under her t-shirt sleeves. Except for her fingers, no skin was visible. "Unwrap the bandages," the man ordered, each word pronounced deliberately. Song Kei hesitated for a moment, then slowly unwound the layers of bandages. The delicate palm of her hand had a few deflated blisters, and there were a few shallow scrapes on her arm. They looked somewhat long but not very deep, and they had already scabbed over. "Accidental scratches," she explained. The man didn't respond immediately. He just looked at Song Kei with a stern expression, his gaze fixated on her hand. The young girl before him had bright eyes and moist pupils, occasionally darting towards the black box, appearing worried about having to pay money. Though they were just ordinary scrapes that seemed perfectly normal and lacked any signs of mutation, the captain seemed lost in thought, remaining silent, his gaze seemingly trying to burn a hole through Zhang Yang. The tall figure beside them couldn't stand it any longer. "Come on, Captain, don't scare the girl. Look at her, she's so nervous that she's stuttering." Ha ha ha, Zhang Yang thought to herself. No need to worry, she was a stutterer to begin with. "Have you awakened your ability?" the man suddenly asked, catching her off guard. His voice was cold and rigid, as if it had been honed by grinding against stones for a long time. Zhang Yang didn't reply, her face displaying just the right amount of confusion. She didn't want to expose the secret of her ability, at least not right now. After what happened with old Cheng, her guard had become even heavier. These people were not only strangers, but they were also fellow ability users like her. She couldn't trust them. If things turned violent, it could become troublesome. The tall figure muttered, observing Zhang Yang from head to toe. "I don't think so. Look at her delicate arms and legs. Doesn't quite fit." A few burly men carrying the tightly wrapped Shu Xing passed by swiftly, boarding the luxury compartment of the starship. The tall figure's voice grew fainter and he awkwardly touched his nose, clearly reminded of how badly they had been dealt with by Shu Xing, who had similarly delicate arms and legs. The man paid no attention to the tall figure's muttering and pointed out directly, "You saved that mutant." A shiver ran down Zhang Yang's spine. She quickly started thinking, did he see it? How much did he see? Her action of turning the piece of wood into a shield had been discreet, and she had retracted it after blocking the ice shards. How did he manage to notice while he was still engaged in battle? Mutants all eventually turn into zombies, without exception. Saving them serves no purpose. The man's cold attitude was like a needle, pricking Zhang Yang. Yet, she stubbornly explained, They aren't zombies yet. At least when she saved them, Aunt Qing and Xiao Bao hadn't turned into zombies yet. They shouldn't be treated like monsters. The man remained non-committal, it's just a matter of time. Zhang Yang fell silent for a moment. She couldn't argue, uncertain why the captain was being particularly stern with the young girl, and Qiwen tried to diffuse the tension. "Miss, don't be so nervous. We mean no harm. We're from the Azure Phoenix Army, the 11th Battalion of the Azure Phoenix. I'm in Qiwen, and this is our captain, Wu Juman." He turned his right palm upward, and faint electric arcs coalesced into a ball in his hand. "If you have awakened an ability too, you can join us. See, the cabin in front is empty." He gestured towards the luxurious compartment of the starship. Zhang Yang stared at the lightning ball in his palm, pursing her lips. "No, I don't have an ability. If not, then stay at the back." Wu Juman withdrew his gaze and walked away briskly. And Qiwen followed him and glanced back at Zhang Yang, who was about to enter the regular cabin. "Captain, are you still suspicious of her having an ability? Isn't it unlikely? I've even mentioned the name of Azure Phoenix. If she really has an ability, wouldn't it be safer for her to come with us? No need to hide anything. She's probably just an ordinary person." Wu Juman's tone was cold, just suspicious. Better if she doesn't. Wu Juman had heightened senses, even more so after awakening his ability. During a recent teleportation, he had sensed a strange and intense energy fluctuation, fleeting though it was. At that moment, only Zhang Yang and two mutants were in that direction. Although the detector was broken, he could have detained her until they found a place for testing. But their squad had an urgent mission. They couldn't afford to waste time here. She was just a suspected ability user and wouldn't cause much trouble. If she denied it, so be it. Furthermore, someone who disregarded orders to save mutants was inherently at odds with the values of Azure Phoenix. Asterisk in the regular cabin of the starship, passengers here were either numb or cautious. When Zhang Yang entered, she didn't draw much attention. Scanning the area, she noticed several rows of empty seats in the back. She lowered her head and took a seat in the corner. Not long after, the engines started, the starship accelerated, and it set forth into the boundless night. This was a low-orbit starship with openable windows. Passengers in the front seats had cracked their windows open, allowing the stifling late summer evening breeze to blow in, carrying a gloomy and humid atmosphere. An air of melancholy hung over every person inside the vehicle, and Song K heard a few low and hoarse sobbing sounds. Everyone's hearts were enveloped in unspeakable shadows. Far from their homeland, the future was uncertain. No one knew if they would survive or for how long. Song K looked out of the window. The mist had receded, and there was no moon tonight. The sea was pitch black, and the faint lights of the isolated islands gradually sank, melding into the darkness of the night. This also meant that District 177 was getting farther and farther away from her. Goodbye, my home. Song K bid her silent farewell in her heart. About an hour after the starship had departed, Shu Weiguo seemed to have regained his spirit and came back to life. He fumbled to stand up from his seat and skillfully made his way to the front where the active duty soldiers were stationed. Apparently, he realized that his money manipulation ability was no longer effective. He took out a pack of premium cigarettes and approached one of the soldiers with a friendly tone. "Hey, buddy, let me ask you something. Where's this starship headed?" The soldier accepted the cigarette, rubbed it a couple of times, sniffed it, and then pushed it back without lighting it, saying, "The nearby D-class city." Shu Weiguo's hand holding the cigarette box trembled twice, and his voice dropped low. "D-class? Why is it a D-class? Aren't we going north, to the base?" The soldier turned his head, gave Shu Weiguo a calculating look that was neither a smile nor a frown, and didn't directly respond. "It's just D-class. We're relocating to a nearby D-class city for now. The next batch of rescue teams won't arrive for another 2 days. After that, we'll take you to the nearest emergency shelter." Shu Weiguo's expression turned grim. He leaned in and seemed to say something to the soldier, his emotions appearing slightly agitated. However, the soldier's attitude remained cold and unyielding. He shook his head at Shu Weiguo and repeated, "I don't know. Follow the orders from above, stick to the protocol." Most of the people on the vehicle weren't in the mood to sleep. As soon as Shu Weiguo returned to his seat with a dark expression, many surrounded him to inquire about the information. "Mr. Shu, you're resourceful. I'd like to ask, where are we headed? Where else can we go? We're just waiting to die somewhere else. Weren't the soldiers supposed to evacuate us? Take us to a safe place? Do you actually believe that? Is a safe place that easy to find? For people like us, it's all up to fate." Although he said, "It's all up to fate," his expression was clenched and full of resentment and sarcasm. "Mr. Shu, what do you mean by that? Do you have some insider information?" an anxious middle-aged man asked. Shu Weiguo stared intently at the person who spoke. "Do you think the apocalypse just came out of nowhere? Aren't they saying it's due to solar activity?" "Nonsense." Shu Weiguo's voice trembled, and he sounded deeply resentful. So many emergency shelters, so many ability users. Could it all have been arranged in just 2 or 3 days? Let me tell you all, they knew about this long ago. Those people knew long ago. And now, the apocalypse has finally arrived. The ability users have become superior beings, while we ordinary folks are just disposable lives, mere puppets for them. Eventually, we'll all turn into zombies. Blue light flickered in Song K's palm, a slender swallowtail dart dancing nimbly between her fingers. The sharp blade brushed against her delicate skin, yet it moved with a grace reminiscent of a child's toy. Upon hearing Shu Weiguo's words about ability users being superior beings and ordinary people being disposable lives, the swallowtail dart spun in a beautiful arc, radiating a chilling coldness. The middle-aged man who was the first to speak was berated by him, and his face turned sour. "Mr. Shu, it's true we're just disposable lives. As long as we survive, it doesn't matter where we go." A trace of disdain appeared in his eyes. "But isn't your son an ability user? Why don't you have a way out?" Shu Weiguo's eyes lit up, as if he had grasped onto a lifeline. He couldn't listen to anyone else's words anymore, muttering to himself, "Right. I have a son, my son is an ability user." The atmosphere in the vehicle, once again, fell into a deep depression after Xu Weiguo's inquiries. Some stared at the partitioned luxury cabin in a daze, while others softly discussed how abilities came about and why they hadn't been so fortunate. Yet, nobody could find a reasonable explanation, nor the courage to question the armed soldiers at the front. Around 4 in the morning, the starship came to a silent stop. At this moment, most of the passengers in the regular cabin were asleep. The few who remained were closing their eyes with evident exhaustion. The subtle mechanical sounds of movement were easily overlooked, but suddenly, Song Kei opened her eyes, rousing from a light doze. She opened the window, stepped onto the window ledge, like an agile gecko, and clung to the window frame as she bent down and slipped out. In a few moves, she climbed onto the top of the starship. Through the dim morning light, she saw that the starship was actually separating automatically. The luxurious cabin housing the ability users reconfigured itself into a separate small aircraft in a matter of seconds. It then switched tracks and headed in a different direction, parting ways with them. Song Kei wasn't foolish enough to shout and create a commotion. She stood on top of the starship, watching as the other aircraft vanished into the distance. She then observed her surroundings and was soon taken aback. Right in the city center, a familiar landmark building caught her eye. The nearby D-class city? It turned out to be here. As dawn broke, a civilian starship silently entered a food factory warehouse on the outskirts of Hua City, D99 district, a suburban area. This rectangular warehouse occupied an area of about 500 square meters and had been converted into a temporary shelter. 3 sides of the walls were sealed, with only a single entrance in the south. A group of armed Alliance soldiers patrolled the entrance, and sentry posts extended out 2 kilometers away. Surface-wise, the security measures were nearly impeccable. All the passengers from the starship disembarked, queued up for inspection, and entered the warehouse like a silent herd of sheep. Song Kei hung at the back of the line, her footsteps gradually slowing, and she started to create distance from the front. While this place appeared safe, it likely came with limitations on movement. Once inside, it would be difficult to get out. Song Kei never fully entrusted her safety to others. She had a different plan since earlier. Taking advantage of several soldiers moving up front to maintain order, she flashed into a nearby alleyway. Tian swallowtail flying knives, also known as swallowtail darts, are traditional Chinese throwing weapons that date to the Northern Song Dynasty, 960-1279. Chapter 9. Rainy Night in Hua City, 1. Doomsday Spiritual Artifact Master. Concentric circles. Who in their right mind would challenge zombies? Concentric circles. Hua City, D99 district, was located in the southeastern part of the New Asia Alliance. The district had convenient land and water transportation, abundant natural resources, and was a rare livable city in Class D. When it came to the most famous aspect of Hua City, it was undoubtedly the extremely complex radial road network in the central city area. With its ingenious layout resembling the pattern of a bagua formation, Hua City had won the gold prize in the first Alliance City Planning Competition. Song Kei was not unfamiliar with Hua City. She had studied here, walked through its streets and alleys, and experienced the summer rains and winter snow of Hua City. If it weren't for what happened later, she might have been even more familiar with this city. However, the Hua City of the present could no longer see the lively scenes of the past. Song Kei traveled from outside the Fifth Ring Road, and as she moved inward, the density of zombie groups along the way grew thicker. The once bustling central commercial area was devoid of people. Along the streets, shops were either looted or closed with thick iron chains hanging on the doors, preventing a clear view of the interiors. As if overnight, the city that had once been filled with crowds and noise had turned into a desolate wasteland. Zombies often roamed the main roads, and Song Kei didn't want any sudden, intimate encounters with them. She had to find alternative routes. She jumped up and down between the rooftops of the residential area, quickly moving through. Unexpectedly, there was a young boy on the opposite high-rise. He looked at her through a security window, and their eyes met. The boy's pupils trembled, startled. He was about to scream when an adult behind him quickly covered his mouth and led him away from the window. They hurriedly closed the curtains. For them, any creature wandering outside was as threatening as a zombie. Song Kei paid no attention to this, as she had spotted an unmanned supermarket. Jumping down from the third floor, she quickly approached her target. The glass door sensed the infrared signal and slid open slowly on both sides. The interior light suddenly dimmed, and Song Kei keenly sensed that there were people inside. 3 or 4 men had their backs to her, rummaging through the shelves. Judging from their attire, they seemed to be local residents. Upon hearing the sound of the door opening, they became tense and turned around as if facing a formidable enemy. They frantically raised weapons like kitchen knives and rolling pins at Song Kei. Song Kei quickly scanned the area and realized that the supermarket had been mostly stripped of its contents. She didn't want to start a conflict recklessly, so she raised her hands immediately, indicating that she meant no harm. She kept her gaze on them and slowly backed out. While other supplies were manageable, after a day and night of traveling, the drinking water was running dangerously low. After exiting the supermarket, she observed the surrounding environment. She suddenly remembered that there should be a delivery station for an online shopping platform nearby. When the platform was first launched, there were a few advertisements about it, including the location of the delivery station. It was supposed to be hidden, maybe at the end of a certain alley. Following her rough memory of the direction, she circled around a few times and indeed found the delivery station, surprisingly still undiscovered by anyone. Song Kei picked the lock and entered. The weather was hot, and the station was filled with the sour smell of rotting fruits and vegetables. She replenished her drinking water, then selected some cakes, dried fruits, sausages, and biscuits with longer shelf lives, stuffing them into her bag with effort. While reorganizing her backpack space, a sudden sound from outside caught her attention. Song Kei zipped up her bag and silently moved to the window, pushing aside the blinds to look outside. At the corner of the alley, several meters away, a burly bald man was dragging a woman, attempting to snatch the bag from her hand. "Let go." The bald man's menacing expression was evident as he threw punches at the woman. The woman had disheveled hair and hunched back, appearing extremely weak, yet she clung tightly to her bag. "Give it back to me. I've worked so hard to find it. Please, give it back to me." After the bag's mouth was pulled open, several cans of loose milk powder spilled out, followed by baby items like bottles and diapers, and finally, 2 or 3 bags of instant noodles. The bald man, having a clear view of the items on the ground, kicked the woman's face angrily, causing blood to flow instantly. Seeing that he had grabbed the bag and was about to run away, the woman disregarded everything and clung to his trousers, shouting hoarsely, "You beast! You'll have a miserable death." The fight outside happened too quickly for Song Kei to intervene. The woman's scream had already pierced the night sky. She inwardly exclaimed, "Not good." True to her fears, within a few seconds, over a dozen zombies came rushing from the main road, swarming into the alley and attacking the 2 individuals with wild bites. The bloody scene and the piercing screams were too distressing to watch. Both individuals fell to the undead onslaught, but the zombies didn't disperse. Attracted by the strong scent of blood, they gathered, more and more of them converging. Soon, the alley became so packed that there was hardly any room to move. The nearest zombie had wandered to the doorstep of the delivery station, passing right by Song Kei on the other side of the window. No, there were getting more and more. Waiting any longer would make it impossible to escape. Song Kei secured her bag's strap, made sure its contents wouldn't spill, and pushed open the delivery station's door. The slight creak of the door caught the attention of the zombie horde. Dozens of pale faces turned in her direction simultaneously. Facing the approaching zombies, Song Kei didn't back down but advanced. Swish swish, several swallowtail darts were thrown accurately, stabbing into the eye sockets and necks of the roaring zombies in front. Their movements were visibly delayed. She picked up a kettle from the station and in an instant, it transformed into a nearly 3-foot-long staff, which she swung down fiercely. The foremost tall zombie's brain matter splattered, its head completely detached. Song K slung its head into the horde and, while rapidly advancing, skillfully swung her staff, knocking away the zombies converging from all sides. When she reached the entrance of the alley, she held the staff's end with both hands, sweeping it 180 degrees in front of her. The remaining zombies that hadn't squeezed in all fell down. In less than 5 minutes, she had cleared an escape path, climbed over the rooftops ahead, and swiftly disappeared. That night, Song K slept on top of an abandoned water tower in the industrial district. It was far from the city center, sparsely populated, and the zombies couldn't climb up. Lying on the concrete ground, she looked up at the chaotic night sky, feeling utterly lost. Since the day she learned of the impending apocalypse, Song K had been lost. Her grandfather had told her to live well, but she had only slept for 3 days. When she woke up, everything had gone awry. She hadn't understood anything yet, and she was already being chased by zombies, abandoned by the Cheng family, followed by her master's death, the martial arts school's destruction, and being forced to leave District 177, exiled to Wa City. Then what? What should she do to survive in this kind of apocalypse? After nearly 2 days and nights without sleep, Song K was reaching her limit. As drowsiness gradually overtook her, she turned over, silently repeating in her mind, regardless of everything, just stay here for a couple of days, hold on until the rescue team arrives. At least, she was familiar with Wa City. Enduring for a while shouldn't be a problem. Moreover, she had to figure out how her special abilities came to be. The next day, Song K continued her exploration westward. As the first light of dawn broke, she arrived at School Street in Wa City. This street used to have many shops, but unexpectedly, there wasn't much left in terms of supplies. It seemed they had already been scavenged once. Passing a corner, faint rustling noises came from up ahead. Song K's right hand gently brushed her pocket, where several swallowtail darts remained. She turned the corner, and there on the ground, a huddled figure was present. Upon hearing footsteps, the figure froze instantly. After a strange silence, the figure slowly raised its head and turned it around, revealing grayish-white eyeballs, a mutilated face covered in flesh and blood, and jagged teeth smeared with who knows what kind of minced meat. Spotting live prey, its pupils dilated, and its mouth slowly opened, ready to roar at Song K. Just as Song K was about to make a move, a succession of shouts erupted from behind. Here! There's a zombie here! Suddenly, a few teenagers in Wa City First Middle School uniforms, each holding a baseball bat, appeared. 2 agile boys rushed past Song K and charged ahead, yelling in terror. In a chaotic flurry, they dispatched the zombie. Afterwards, they turned their attention cautiously to Song K, while the remaining individuals slowly spread out, encircling her. Who is she? No, is she human or a zombie? Probably human, but she was just standing with the zombies. Who in their right mind would challenge a zombie face to face like that? Which one of you wants to go ask her? I surely don't dare. No, why are you all looking at me? I said I don't dare. Finally, the chubby guy who repeated, I don't dare, several times was pushed forward. Gathering his courage, he nervously asked, Miss, are you a human? Song K moved her hand away from her pocket and was about to answer, but the chubby guy started panicking on his own. Oh no. She's not speaking, she's so fierce. I said I don't dare, woo woo woo. Quote. Song K took a deep breath and explained, one word at a time, I am human. Tears welled up in the chubby guy's eyes. Then, how did you come out alone? What are you all doing, standing here? At this moment, 7 or 8 more people arrived at the intersection, joining the group of students. Among them, a gentle-looking girl inadvertently caught sight of Song K and exclaimed, "You're Song K?" Song K slowly raised her gaze upon hearing that voice. "Yi, do you know her?" a round-faced girl asked with confusion. After finishing her awkward shout, Cao Yi unexpectedly encountered Song K's ice-cold dark pupils. She quickly averted her gaze, as if pricked by a needle, and stumbled to explain, "Oh, she was my former classmate." She glanced furtively at the figure of a certain guy ahead, her explanation distracted and hasty. The guy had his back turned to her, facing in Song K's direction, his posture appearing quite tense. Cao Yi bit her lip, fingers nervously clutching her clothes corner. Suddenly, she took the initiative to approach, grabbed Song K's hand, and put on an intentionally enthusiastic smile. "Song K, you disappeared from school without a word. We were all surprised. Later, we heard you went back to your hometown to work. How did you end up here now?" Expressionless, Song K stared at their intertwining hands until Cao Yi awkwardly let go. Then, she turned to the chubby guy and continued to answer in a measured tone, "I got separated from the retreat group accidentally, so I'm alone." "Oh, I see." The chubby guy didn't expect Song K to still answer him, and he responded foolishly. Someone was successfully amused, and the way they looked at Song K suddenly changed. "What's this? A stutterer? I heard survivors from other districts have come over these 2 days. Seems like they want to manage us collectively. Weren't they supposed to be centralized? Then why is she wandering outside alone? Who knows, but she seems pretty bold." The girls in our class would scream at the sight of zombies. Amid their laughter and banter, Song K stood unmoved, her expression unchanged. "Brother Zhang, what do you think?" A young man, whose hair looked like it had been curled with aluminum foil, appeared more mature than the others. He asked softly, looking at the tall and silent guy who had been standing at the forefront. Zhang Rui's gaze was complex. He stared at Song K in silence, the old scar on his brow especially prominent in the sunlight. He clenched his hand tightly and then released it unexpectedly. He invited, "Song K, our school has a safe zone with around 100 people. Do you want to come with us?" He added, "We have people with special abilities." "Zhang Rui, why are you telling her all this? She's not from our school." Another guy complained unhappily. Zhang Rui touched the ring on his hand. His icy gaze swept over the person, and they immediately shut up in fear. Encountering Zhang Rui and Cao Yi unexpectedly made Song K's mood plummet. She felt irritated, truly annoyed, and wanted to avoid any interactions with them. She had already taken steps forward when she heard the last sentence, causing her to hesitate. "Special abilities? They have people with special abilities. Maybe they know something." Song K nodded, "Sure." Chapter 10. Rainy Night in Hua City, 2. Doomsday Spiritual Artifact Master. Concentric circles. More terrifying than zombies. Concentric circles. Zhang Rui appeared to be the leader of this group of high school students, with everyone else in the team obeying his every word, except for Song K. Song K had a carefree attitude, not quite understanding the twists and turns of social interactions. When Zhang Rui asked her to join him, she unreservedly stood by his side, paying no attention to the people behind her and their varied expressions. The atmosphere remained quiet throughout the journey, and the two of them only exchanged a few words after a long while. Song K was not one to speak much, she had always been of few words. Zhang Rui, on the other hand, was acting unusually. In the past, he had been bold and unruly, making it impossible to ignore his existence. Almost 3 years had passed, and his recklessness had mellowed considerably. His entire demeanor had transformed as if he had undergone a profound change, almost as if he had completely forgotten the past grievances when facing Song K. He even took the initiative to explain the current situation. On the day of the solar eruption, it happened to be the day students returned to school. Many people suddenly fainted. At that time, no one realized the severity of the situation. They thought it was just ordinary heatstroke and took them to the medical room. The first zombie appeared that evening, followed by the second, the third. In less than 2 days, the school was completely overrun. You mean, there are people with special abilities among you? Yes, there are 3 individuals with special abilities. And how many normal people were there? 123. 2 days ago, there were nearly 200, but some didn't want to stay at the school and found ways to escape, either back home or to nearby shelters. After they left, we lost all contact with them, so there have been fewer people leaving these past few days. At this critical juncture, students who lost contact were probably facing dire circumstances. Song K tactfully refrained from further questions. Song K, how have you been? Quite abruptly, Zhang Rui turned to her and asked. Song K glanced at him in bewilderment. This question was quite out of the blue, and she didn't know how to respond. If she said she was doing well, it would be a lie. With her family gone and nowhere to belong, how could she be considered well? If she said she wasn't doing well, she would have been bitten by zombies long ago on this journey and wouldn't be standing here conversing with Zhang Rui. Zhang Rui seemed to realize that his question was ill-timed. After a moment of silence, he changed the subject. Several minutes later, they found a Western-style restaurant and managed to pry open the locked curtain at the entrance. The group was preparing to split into 2 teams for a search. We haven't been to this restaurant before. I'll take a few people to the main hall and the second floor. Zhang Hao, you and your group go to the kitchen to look for food. Keep it quiet and don't attract any zombies. Zhang Rui quickly organized the teams. There were 12 people in total. He took 7 with him, leaving the remaining 5 with Zhang Hao. Cao Yi was assigned to Zhang Rui's team, and she wisely refrained from engaging in conversation with Song K, keeping her head down and lost in thought. When it was Song K's turn, Zhang Rui hesitated for a moment. Song K, go with Zhang Hao to the kitchen. Zhang Hao, who had received this hot potato, didn't voice any objections upon hearing this. He cast a lingering glance at Song K before complying. The main hall faced the street, and the second floor had numerous outdoor balconies. Compared to the kitchen, which was situated deep within the restaurant, the danger level was naturally higher. By assigning Song K to Zhang Hao's team, everyone understood that they were looking out for her. Song K didn't mind, she was fine with going wherever. Since the teams were already divided, she simply agreed and stood behind Zhang Hao. The kitchen was located deep within the Western-style restaurant. They crossed the main hall and walked along the corridor for a while. Someone exclaimed in excitement, "There's a cold storage room here." Zhang Hao immediately decided, "Let's go check it out." When Song K tried to follow them inside, Zhang Hao reached out and stopped her. "Wait here, classmate. Don't move around." Zhang Hao had already come out for the 3rd time. He was more cautious than the others, and the addition of a fragile girl to the team, especially one who had a connection with Zhang Rui, didn't sit well with him. If this girl started causing trouble with tears and complaints, it could jeopardize their lives. At the moment, he just hoped that Song K would stay put like a fragile doll, not offering assistance and not causing any disruptions. Song K sensed his rejection and slowly retracted her raised foot. Oh, Zhang Hao and another boy continued to carry out beef, mutton, fruits, and vegetables from the cold storage room. They handed the items to the round-faced girl in their team, who squatted on the ground, organizing the various foods and packing them into the backpacks of several people. Song K was left standing aside, and the girl didn't show any intention of asking for her help. She ended up sitting on a table, watching them work. Inside the narrow kitchen, 2 boys entered one after the other, searching for supplies with curiosity. Wow, this restaurant's kitchen is so small. There probably isn't much here. So should we go back outside? Why rush? Going out now means helping with carrying things. Some of the potatoes in the basket had started to sprout. The taller boy picked up a small one, mimicking a basketball shot, and playfully threw it into the chubby boy's hooded t-shirt. 3 points. Nice shot. The chubby boy wore a distressed expression. Kong Ziqi, stop messing around. Kong Ziqi ignored him and continued, it's fine. Brother Zhang and the others are outside. Hey, Tianyi, don't dodge. Chubbs was afraid of pain, twisting and turning to evade. The small potato's aim was off, and it missed him, bouncing off the counter with a few thuds, seemingly hitting something with a muffled sound. Both of them were surprised and simultaneously turned their heads to the point of impact. Several zombies stood up unsteadily, one of them wearing a white chef's hat and being as round as a small hill. Kong Ziqi was dumbfounded, staying frozen for several seconds. These zombies were holding spatulas and knives in their hands. Oh my god, Tianyi, run! Since he was close to the door, Kong Ziqi rushed out in a few steps, gripping the doorframe and shouting, quick, come over, Tianyi. Tianyi was positioned closer to the inside. He was facing the head chef zombie directly and, in his panic, stumbled. The head chef zombie reached out and grabbed his leg. Tianyi desperately kicked and stomped on its face, shouting in terror, help! Help! The commotion quickly reached the outside, and Zhang Hao's group hurriedly rushed out of the cold storage room. Even Zhang Rui's team arrived in haste. Kong Ziqi's voice was trembling with urgency. Brother Zhang, save Tianyi. The kitchen's door was narrow, allowing only one person to pass at a time. Inside the confined space, Zhang Rui hesitated while rubbing the ring on his right hand. He wasn't particularly skilled in close combat. However, as he lifted his head and faced the expectant gazes of everyone around him, his breath caught, and with a voice hoarse with resolution, he finally ordered, once I'm in, all of you retreat. But someone acted even quicker than him. Song Ke had been idly watching, swinging her slender legs, as the girls packed the food. Suddenly, she heard a scream from the kitchen. Soon after, a boy stumbled out, disoriented. Without much thought, she used one hand to support herself on the table and leapt out. Like a whirlwind, she rushed into the room. Delivering several swift kicks to the chubby chef zombie's belly, she forced it to retreat. Then, she grabbed a bucket from the sink with lightning speed and slammed it down on the zombie's head. When it staggered in confusion, flailing its limbs, she caught hold of the chubby boy's collar, pulling him up, and swiftly instructed, run, now. The slightly chubby boy, Tianyi, weighing around 160 pounds, was flung out of the kitchen by her like a ball. The pursuing zombies followed suit. Song Ke targeted their vulnerable joints, attacking with cracking bone sounds. Snap, snap. The movements of the zombies were disoriented, and she then picked up the baseball bat that Tianyi had dropped. With a heavy thud, she struck the head of the head chef zombie who had just managed to free itself from the bucket. It fell backwards in confusion, its bulky body resembling a bowling ball. It collided with the other zombies, creating a clattering commotion. Taking advantage of the chaos, Song Ke swiftly shut the door, locked it, and pushed tables against it. Turning around, she faced a group of teenagers, their jaws dropping in shock as they looked at her. Song Ke kindly informed them, it's taken care of. We should leave. Silence. A eerie silence. After a while, someone couldn't hold back their amazement. It feels like, Kong Ziqi supported Tianyi, swallowing hard, she's more terrifying than zombies. Zhang Rui stood at the front of the crowd, looking at Song Ke's slender figure. The old scar on his brow seemed to throb slightly. He couldn't help but smile wryly to himself. Indeed, he had been overthinking things. Back in the day, Song Ke could handle an entire class on her own. Why had he ever thought she needed his protection? Pack up, let's go quickly. The journey back to the school went surprisingly smoothly, perhaps because Zhang Rui's group had become familiar with the route and didn't encounter any more zombies along the way. The high schoolers whispered behind Song Ke's back, no longer daring to mock her openly. Lin Shaw, the round-faced girl who was previously in Song Ke's group, tugged on Cao Yi's sleeve and said with surprise, Yi, what's the deal with your classmate? She's amazing. Cao Yi lowered her eyelashes, her voice soft and hard to read. Is that so? She's always liked to fight. As they approached Hua City No. 1 Middle School, Song K finally voiced the question that had been on her mind for a while. I have a question. What's the question? Tell me, if the school is infested with zombies, why is there still a safe zone? Well, you'll find out soon. Instead of entering the school through the main gate, they took a detour around a side hill. When they looked down from the slope, the sight before them left Song K momentarily speechless. Hundreds and thousands of zombies dressed in Hua City No. 1 Middle School uniforms had taken over the playground, dormitories, and teaching buildings. Their dense presence was enough to make one's scalp tingle. They wandered everywhere like ghosts, their heads twitching nervously as they turned, sniffing the scent of living humans in the air. This was the largest zombie horde that Song K had seen since the apocalypse, and also the most chilling. After all, these were once lively boys and girls in their teens, with bright futures ahead of them, the hopes of the Alliance. Now, they had become lifeless walking corpses. The expressions of everyone grew heavy. Tianyi's sadness was about to overflow from his face. In our class, except for me and Kong Ziqi, everyone. Our homeroom teacher was bitten by the zombies while trying to protect us. Even Kong Ziqi, who had always been jovial, had red eyes as he turned away. Zhang Rui pointed in a direction. There's the safe zone. He was referring to a storm-proof, enclosed stadium near the edge of the school, built using the latest seismic and fire-resistant materials provided by the Alliance. Behind it was a high-voltage electric fence. Song K gazed at the tightly packed zombies outside the stadium. How do we get in? Through here. Zhang Rui took the lead, and the others followed him. They went around the slope behind the stadium. When they got closer, Song K noticed a hole in the high-voltage electric fence. It looked as if it had been burned open by intense heat, just large enough for an adult to pass through. However, 2 or 3 zombies were wandering nearby. Step back. The group halted in the woods not far from the zombies. Zhang Rui's voice was stern. Everyone else took 2 steps backward, and Song K hesitated for a moment before falling back in line with them. She looked left and right, took small steps, and aligned herself with the others on the same level. Zhang Rui took off his ring and walked towards the zombies. Song K's sharp eyes noticed a faint red mark around the base of his middle finger. Just then, Zhang Rui raised his hand, and a 2-meter-long flame snake burst from his palm, instantly transforming into a fiery whip. He lashed it at several zombies, the smell of burning flesh and skin quickly spreading. The zombies emitted cries of agony and soon fell to the ground. It finally dawned on Song K. Zhang Rui was actually an ability user. After dealing with the zombies, Zhang Rui turned back and glanced at Song K. It seemed like he wanted to say something, but the others had already burst into cheers. Brother Zhang is amazing. That AoE skill, it's so satisfying to whip those zombies. After eliminating the minor obstacle blocking their path, the group passed through the gap in the electric fence and soon arrived beneath the wall at the back of the stormproof stadium. Zhang Rui took out his phone and typed out a message. 2 minutes later, something unbelievable happened. The wall in front of them rapidly dissolved, revealing the shape of a door, jutting out abruptly. A transforming door? Song K, welcome to the safe zone. After Zhang Rui finished speaking, he pushed open the door without hesitation. The group filed inside, and the door closed again, existing for about 10 seconds before suddenly disappearing. Song K turned around, only to see that the wall was as smooth as before.